Good evening and happy Veterans Day. Thank you for joining us for this evening's program. At this time, I ask everybody to please rise, and gentlemen, remove your covers. Veterans may remain covered and render a hand salute as the national anthem is performed by members of the Governor's own 126th Army Band. Please help me thank the members of the 126th Army Band for their performance this evening and their service to our state and nation. Veterans Day is a special day. Not officially known as Veterans Day until 1954, November 11th was originally established as Armistice Day in 1919 to honor the end of World War I. The historical significance of the date, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, provides an extraordinary backdrop to honor and celebrate all American veterans. I would like to ask all veterans to please stand. Thank you. Thank you for your service. As a veteran, I am extremely grateful to belong to an organization that is dedicating the time and resources to support veteran students. I would be remiss to not recognize Grand Valley's Office of the President and the Peter Secchia Military and Veteran Resource Center, their efforts to make our campus veteran inclusive. I now have the privilege to introduce one of our Peter C. Cook Leadership Academy fellow candidates to provide tonight's Leadership Minute and introduce tonight's featured speaker. Nick Adams is a United States Marine who hails from West Michigan. He received an honorable discharge in 2019, then returned home to Grand Rapids to begin his pursuit of a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology. He currently serves as Vice President of Grand Valley's chapter of Student Veterans of America and is a fellow candidate of the Peter C. Cook Leadership Academy. Please help me welcome Nick Adams.
My name is Nick Adams, and I'm a Peter C. Cook Leadership Academy fellow candidate. Leadership was best put into perspective for me, during my time in the United States Marine Corps. In February of 2018, I was freezing on the side of a mountain. My commanding officer had just called me and the fellow squad leaders in my unit in for a mission briefing. It was in this specific brief that I first noticed what my commander had written inside the journal that he had on his person at all times. It's not about you. Until that point, I thought leadership was just a title to wear proudly or an achievement to put on a resume. I realized, that day changed me, and I've striven to live by that principle every day since. With this new outlook, I realized that leadership is a responsibility to serve those that you're fortunate enough to lead. I realize that their eyes are always upon you, not to be impressed or to be entertained by your accomplishments, but rather to look out for their best interest, not only your own. This phrase stuck with me throughout my time in the Marine Corps and beyond. Whether leading in a machine gun squad, in the classroom, or while managing a project, I've learned that a selfless approach to the task at hand can not only provide a better solution to the problem, but also creates a more effective team. I'd like you all to think of a time where you set your self-interest aside for the benefit of the team. Imagine the world we could create if this was the norm. Remember, it's not about you. My name is Nick Adams, and I'm a leader. Now, if you'll please direct your attention to this video introducing Lieutenant Jason Redman.
Jason Redman, he is a retired Navy SEAL who was wounded while deployed in Iraq.
So in September of 2007, I was literally at the height of my career. Everybody in life at some point is going to walk into an ambush. Some sort of catastrophic event that's going to rock your world and have this impact on your life. The majority of people who walk this earth have never wrestled with an enemy combatant in the deep blackness of night. I quickly realized I was helpless. I was totally pinned down in front of my guys, and there was nothing I could do. I would have given anything to be out of this situation. That day became a benchmark for me. It changed everything in my life. I realized in that moment that I got a second chance at life. Most people, you only get one shot to go through this life and make the most of it. And most people take it for granted. In an ambush, we talk about the point of attack. It's called the X. The reason I survived the one that I was in is because we got off the X. And I said, okay, let's drive forward. We can do this. But everybody out there will go through life ambushes. And these are these hard moments that come along and just knock us off our feet. Because we've all been in that situation where we're like, oh my God, I can't make payroll. How am I going to bring in some revenue right now? We can't make rent. I've felt it. I realized the mark of a man is not found in his past, but how he overcomes adversity and builds his future. But the great thing about major life ambushes, they also can define you and make you better, just like that ambush that I went through. If you can create balance in these 5 key areas of something I call the Pentagon of peak performance, I guarantee you, you will be ready for any ambush that comes along. When I was wounded, I had gone through that journey where I had colossally failed as a leader, where I had guys say, kick him out and take his trident. It is the hardest road I've ever walked in my entire lifetime. But it built tremendous mental leadership. The only thing stopping you from accomplishing greatness in your life is you. When you are struggling, get off the X and overcome.
Good evening. Thank you. You don't need, please. Don't need to stand, thank you. I am still here. I've attended over 50, at a minimum, funerals and memorials for teammates lost who are no longer here, who are engraved on granite walls across this country. So I'm still here, I'm blessed, so no need to stand for me. But I am honored to be here, to still be alive and to be able to share my story, but especially on Veterans Day. There are several days of the year that I always want to be doing my job, if you will, which is my new mission in this life, being out here and motivating and inspiring through not only the things that I've been through, but many of the stories that I've been witness to as part of an elite fighting force. So no better way than to spend my Veterans Day than to be here with you guys, both celebrating Veterans Day and talking about amazing things related to Veterans Day. I am super fortunate. One of the unique things about being a Navy SEAL, and this is the emblem for the Navy SEALs, it's called the Trident. One of the amazing things is we worked in a very joint environment. And I worked alongside all members of the armed services. I worked alongside U.S. Army Rangers. Do I have any? Where are my Army veterans? So I know we got quite a few in here. So yeah, much respect and appreciation for you guys. Worked alongside Rangers. I went to Ranger School. I went to Airborne School. I flew on TF-160th aircraft. I frequently interfaced with young Army infantry officers, depending on things we were doing abroad. Obviously, I worked with the U.S. Navy. Where are my Navy veterans? So yeah, go Navy. Not only in Naval Special Warfare, which I spent the majority of my career, but Naval Special Warfare has far more than just SEALs. We have amazing support personnel, administrative personnel. We have amazing communicators and intel, medical, ordnance men, and all these different people, human intelligence individuals who work with us on many of the missions that we do. I worked with the United States Air Force. Do we have any Air Force veterans? So much appreciation and respect for you guys. Your golf courses were always the best. Your food was so good. No. Actually, I worked extensively with the Air Force, especially on the special operations side of the house. The Air Force pararescuemen, the combat controllers, we frequently deployed with us. I flew on a myriad of aircraft. One of the more, oftentimes people ask me, what are some of the cool things you got to do in your career? Some were operational, some were training. Probably one of the coolest training things I ever did was in Mildenhall, England. We were doing training with the Air Force, and on a MC-130, we landed it right on the beach, a rapid exfil with our tactical vehicles, literally landed on a beach, slammed to a halt, disembarked our vehicles, went and conducted an operation, and then this aircraft landed again, and while it was still rolling down the beach, brought our vehicles back up onto the back of that beach and took off. It was amazing. So the Air Force does things like that, which is pretty incredible. I owe my life to an AC-130 gunship. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Any Coast Guardsmen? So I worked with the Coast Guard. So respect and appreciation for you guys. Coast Guard does a lot more than people realize. Coast Guard was actually deployed in Iraq doing interdiction operations down off the coast. And I was doing counter-drug operations with the Coast Guard in Peru in 1998. National Guard, Air National Guard, any Air National Guard or National Guard with us? So, and last but not least, I always leave them last, but my devil dogs. Yeah, so happy birthday, Marine Corps. The Marines owned the battle space when I was in Fallujah, and I worked extensively with the Marines. I deconflicted, since they owned the battle space and we operated everywhere, I frequently was deconflicting with them, and I did several operations, and just Marines are tough, and I got respect for them. So tonight, a lot of people want to come, and maybe you've heard my story, you've heard things about me. Tons of people meet me and say, hey, I heard you on this podcast or that podcast, or I saw this documentary about you, or maybe you read my book or my books. And I'm going to tell parts of my story tonight. But tonight, I really want to talk more about our country, especially related to Veterans Day. Earning this emblem and the journey that it took to get it enabled some amazing things. And the lessons that I learned within the SEAL teams are lessons that I carry forward today. No different than many other members of our military forces. I personally wish it was a requirement that every single member of our country had to serve for at least a year. And if it wasn't that, then General Stan McChrystal has a national service initiative idea that he has, that we create more service organizations, that we have 5 or 6. Because not everybody wants to go into the military, but maybe it's Peace Corps, maybe it's AmeriCorps, maybe it's the military, maybe it's these other service industry or service organizations we create that young Americans have to go forth and learn what's abroad, learn what's beyond our borders, all these different things. And because those were the things that I learned. Being a SEAL, I know my members of the audience that were military members, it goes far beyond having great hair, looking cool in gear. writing books and being in TV shows, because that's what, people in the military frequently tell me. That is a joke. You're allowed to laugh at it. So we can laugh at ourselves. So tonight, though, it's really not about this. Tonight and Veterans Day is really about the sacrifice that built our country. And a sacrifice that goes all the way back 247 years at this point, to the beginning of our nation, where, this fledgling country that fell under the purview of England basically was being overtaxed and under this rule. And basically the American citizens said, hey, we've had enough. We're not going to put up with this anymore. And that's what obviously led to the start of the Revolutionary War. But what was interesting about the Revolutionary War is we did not have a military. It was the average everyday citizen, people just like you in this room who said, I'm willing to fight for freedom. And they stepped up, and they didn't have the training. Many of them didn't even have firearms. Many of them showed up with pitchforks. Yet they learned, and we came together under George Washington and with the help of some of the other leaders that came together to form our military and fight against one of the greatest military powers in the world at that time. And it was through that sacrifice that it enabled our country to become what it is. The interesting thing is right now we're at a weird state in our country. I frequently hear a lot of things like, America's a terrible place. It was born out of lies. Our founding fathers were horrible people. I frequently get told I'm a baby killer and all these other things online, by the keyboard warriors out there. Fascinating to me, especially considering all the places in the world that I've been and the things that I've seen, So frequently people will say to me right now, there's no hope. There's no hope. This is a common feeling I hear. I frequently hear younger Americans say to me, well, I'm never going to have kids because I don't want to raise my kids in this country. I'm like, how sad is that? I hear there's nothing I can do. Politics is rigged, so why vote? Why make a difference? I hear the whole world's outside of my control, so I'm just going to mind my own business and do my own thing. When I grew up, I came from a small town in Ohio, ended up living all up and down the East Coast. My mom was a first-generation American. My grandparents immigrated from France after the war. My grandfather fought with the French, and they loved this country. I grew up under this amazing idea of the United States of America, that this flag and everything that it represented was incredible. I wore, and I would later wear it on my uniform, would later see teammates who were draped under it when they came home. And it troubles me because I grew up in the United States of America, and right now we're living in the divided states of America. I frequently see individuals who are unwilling to even hold a discussion with someone the moment they find out, oh, you don't share my political views? Well, then I must hate you. I don't understand that, because even overseas, I would sit down with terrorists and bad guys to try and find some common ground, to hopefully find some way that we could accomplish what needed to happen on both sides. And if we couldn't, then of course it led to, violence, but we at least tried to have a civil discourse before that happened, and that's not happening today. So all of that has really led me down this path recently in the last couple of years to say, what does it really mean to be an American? There are a lot of people who want to apologize for America like it's a bad place. And I don't see that. I went all over the world. I got to do amazing things. I got to make a difference in so many places where I saw poverty at a level that I saw little kids in places who were naked with bloated stomachs, literally picking trash up off the street and licking rocks and things for sustenance. I don't see that here in America very often. I saw little girls in Afghanistan who had their noses and their ears cut off because they went to school. Thankfully, we don't see that here in America. You know, this country is an amazing place, but I think some people just need to, ask themselves, what does it really mean to be an American? You know, right now, this school is focused on this idea of an empowered citizen. And I think you have to ask yourself that question in order to be an empowered citizen. What does it mean to be an American? I am fascinated with the formation of our country. I'm fascinated by George Washington. He's one of my favorite leaders. I just think about the burden he had to carry when he was trying to form our nation and fight this war against the greatest military power in the world. And at one point during the war, no one agreed with him. No one wanted to support him. Even his own friends were questioning him. Yet he managed to stay the course and have the conviction, one of the most important things in leadership when we're trying to drive forward. So it makes me think back to the beginning of our nation, the foundations of our country. And the idea of being an American citizen in this country, what were you gifted for being a citizen? Well, the first one was life. We put a priority, we put weight, we put value on this idea of life, that your life means something, that we want to protect your life. The sanctity of life was an important thing. And to this day, we still try and do that. We have laws and accountability that we try and enforce, that no one can just come along. I can't just kill you in the front row and get away with it and walk away, because we put a priority on life. In so many places in the world, I saw that doesn't exist. When I was in Iraq, during the Hussein regime, so many people are against us toppling Hussein, yet he would frequently go into villages and kill anyone who disagreed with him. Rape their families, kill people. They didn't care about life. Liberty, freedom, your ability to get out and accomplish your hopes and dreams. I mean, it's one of the biggest things that I fought for, so that my kids hopefully would have that opportunity to go forth and go after their hopes and dreams. So many people would say to me, hey, why did you do what you did? Well, I did it so that hopefully my kids could go after their hopes and dreams, and now they're doing that, which is pretty darn amazing. And then the last one is the pursuit of happiness, which is a fascinating thing to me, because I meet a lot of people who feel like they're entitled to something as a citizen of this country. The only thing you're entitled to is life, liberty, and see that word right there? Pursuit. It's a pursuit of happiness. It's on you. We must choose it. You must go out there. You go after. We grind. We go after our hopes and dreams. But that's on you. And we've created a nation that has the freedom and opportunity for you to be able to do that. And I've been so many places that doesn't exist. You know, when I look at this flag and I think about all the things that I've been through, and I think about the other places I've been in the world, this flag represents one thing. It represents a choice. As American citizens, we have a choice. We have a choice in who we're going to vote for. We have a choice in what we're going to do for a living. We have a choice in where we want to live. We have a choice in how we want to live our lives. That is such a powerful thing. Because I think about my military service, because that also came down to choice. I know during Vietnam we had the draft, but after that it went away. As I grew up, we have an all-volunteer military force now. I made a choice to go join the SEAL teams. My teammates made a choice. At any time, guys can leave and say, I don't want to do this anymore. They go back to the regular Navy. The most powerful thing we have is choice. So as I thought about what does it mean to be an American and choosing to do the things we do, I thought about different stories that really highlight amazing levels of military service, that highlight this choice that sets us apart and unique as American citizens, and especially sets us apart as veterans. And one of the stories that really stood out that set the tone is a story that occurred during the First Battle of Fallujah in 2004. And Colonel Oliver North happened to be over there. He was working as a war correspondent, watching what was going on, and the Marines were pushing into the city along with some Army units, and Colonel North was kind of in the back. Up near the front, there was some heavy, heavy fighting going on in the city. And there was a corpsman assigned to the Marines who was going back and forth getting wounded soldiers and Marines and bringing them back to the casualty collection point. And he's going back and forth and carrying different American soldiers. And at one point, he comes by and he's carrying a wounded Iraqi soldier. And there are a couple of Reuters reporters, foreign reporters, that saw it and they said, "Hey, Yank, don't you realize that's not an American?" And the corpsman never missed a beat, looks over at the reporters without batting an eye, and he goes, "We're Americans. It's what we do." And he kept running. We're Americans. It's what we do. He made a choice, an amazing choice, a choice that I saw frequently throughout my career that embodies what it is to be an American. I will never forget, we took down a target in Afghanistan in a very heavily Taliban-controlled area of southern Afghanistan. And after the initial battle had ended, through the night, we had called in airstrikes. And in the morning, we went down and did a battle damage assessment. We found a lot of dead Taliban, and we also found a wounded Taliban who had been pinned by an inert bomb that actually had fell, that knocked a tree down, and the tree landed on him. He'd been shot. He was pinned by this tree. Talk about bad luck, you know? I mean, you manage to get shot, you're crawling away, and literally a bomb falls that skipped across the ground, hit a tree, knocked the tree down, and it pinned him to the ground. So anyways, we found this guy, and my troop commander said, "Hey, you know, battle's over. It is our job to save them. That is the way we work. That is the code of conflict and the Geneva Convention." So we actually medevac this Taliban guy out of that valley. And I remember how dangerous it was. We had to bring helicopters way down to the bottom of the valley with high ground on both sides. Incredibly dangerous. We made a choice. And I saw this choice made over and over again throughout my career. How many of you have seen the movie Lone Survivor or maybe read that book? Pretty powerful story, no? Pretty amazing. So I'm personally connected to that story. That was my troop. Eric Christensen, who was played by Eric Bana in the movie, was my troop commander. The guys on the helicopter, many of them, Eric Christensen was one, but Mike McGreevy was a friend of mine in my OIC. In the beginning, I got moved to a separate platoon, but Jacques Fontaine, Jeff Taylor, and Jeff Lucas were all teammates of mine on that day. But the story around Lone Survivor is a pretty amazing story for those who may not be aware of it. What had happened is SEAL Team 10 was operating in the Korangal Valley of Afghanistan, Western Province, close to the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. And they were going after a high-level Taliban leader. And we sent in a reconnaissance force, a four-man reconnaissance force comprised of Lieutenant Mike Murphy, Marcus Luttrell, Matt Axelson, and Danny Dietz. And it was their job to survey a village below to get eyes on this Taliban commander for then our troop to go in as the assault force to take him out. Well, as they were maneuvering around the village to get their final set point to be able to look into the village, they got compromised. The locals contacted the Taliban, which turned into a very large running gunfight. We estimate there were at least 50 Taliban fighters against these four individuals. They were all shot multiple times. They got pushed down into this valley and were surrounded by all sides by Taliban fighters. Mike Murphy, Lieutenant Murphy, being the senior leader, recognized that if they couldn't get the quick reaction force, our guys that were back on standby in Jalalabad with the helicopters to move in, that nobody was going to be left. But his radio wasn't working because of the terrain. So he recognized the only way he could get a call out was with a satellite phone, an Iridium phone that he had. But the only way he could do that was to move out into the open and climb up on this rock out in the center. And in that moment, that's what Mike Murphy decided to do. He went out into the open And literally, as that call went across to our tactical operations center, was being shot as he made that call. Because he knew that no one was going to make it out of there if he couldn't get that call out. They made the call out, helicopter took off with all our guys on it. And unfortunately, as they came in, the helicopter was shot down. And we lost 19 individuals, 8 special operations aviation crewmen. We lost 8 SEALs on the helicopter, and then of course we ended up losing the 3 SEALs on the ground, but Marcus Luttrell survived, hence the lone survivor. Mike Murphy, an amazing leader, would end up being posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. The most amazing thing I think about that story is he made a choice. You know, he could have sat back there in that moment and just said, I don't know what we're going to do, we're being overrun. But instead, as a leader, and I think such strong embodiments of what it means to be an American, he chose to go out to sacrifice himself for his guys. And he didn't manage to save everybody, but he saved one. You know, the power of choice. Or maybe the story of Petty Officer Mike Monsoor. How many have read the book Extreme Ownership? So Mikey Monsoor was attached to T.F. Bruiser with Jocko, and they were operating in Ramadi in 2006. And 06, 07 in Iraq were super volatile times. Really, Iraq had kind of devolved into a civil war. You had factions of the insurgency, you had Al-Qaeda, you had heavy Iranian influence with Muqtada al-Sadr and the Sadr militia, which was Shia. So Sunni and Shia did not like each other, and then we had the insurgents, and Iraq just kind of devolved into this civil war. Those of us who fought there in 06, 07, it was some of the most violent fighting, and we probably see the majority of our casualties in Iraq came out of that 2-year time frame. So they're in Ramadi at this time, and they're conducting operations in the city, and they've been doing what we call overwatch operations. They held the high ground on a building, and Mike Monsoor was up there with some snipers. He was a machine gunner. Throughout the day, they had gotten into some skirmishes, and things had gotten quiet, so they were just kind of taking a break. And Monsoor got up to stretch his legs, and his sniper teammates were still on their guns. And in Iraq, in the rooftops, there's a little bit of a lip that you can get behind. It's a concrete lip that you can look over. And then there is a little structure on top of the buildings. We called it a cupola. And the stairs came up from inside the house that led to the roof. And Monsoor got up and stood behind the cupola to stretch his legs. And he's kind of standing right like this. You can see his sniper buddies. And right at that moment, a terrorist threw a grenade up onto the roof that literally landed right in between his teammates. And at that moment, he was faced with an amazing choice. He could have taken one step back, and that grenade would have gone off, and he would have been saved. He wouldn't have had a scratch on him. But he didn't. The choice that he had was save myself or save my teammates who don't have the opportunity to get out of there. And he rushed forward and jumped on top of that grenade, and it detonated. He shielded it with his body armor and body and detonated, saving the lives of those 2 snipers, but mortally wounding him. Mike would be awarded posthumously the Medal of Honor for his actions. I mean, a powerful choice to choose to sacrifice yourself. I think it's an amazing thing when people want to knock our flag and knock our country. It has been built on hundreds of thousands of choices like this that have enabled us to be who we are. Or maybe the story of Sergeant First Class Leroy Petrie. Leroy is an amazing warrior. He's still with us today. He is now the chairman of the National Medal of Honor Society. Leroy was a 75th Ranger operating in the Wardak province of Afghanistan in 2008. And his Ranger company was conducting an operation on a small compound. And they had maneuvered in, and somebody got shot. Leroy moved to that guy, and then he got shot. He took a round that went through both legs. He managed to grab the guy and himself and move to kind of an interior courtyard area. One of the other Rangers came up to try and support them, and then he was shot. So now the 3 of them are pinned down. Leroy's trying to help and continue to fight. And right about that time, an insurgent threw a grenade into the center of them. Leroy immediately picked it up and threw it, but right as it left his hand, it detonated and it took his hand off. Leroy made a choice. He could have rolled over and got out of the way from that grenade. He was further away from it than the other two guys. Instead, he chose, I'm willing to sacrifice myself to save my brothers. Powerful. He made a choice. Let me tell you about my stories. All of these guys I crossed paths with, I knew, I witnessed these amazing choices that have enabled our country to be what it is today. I think that's so powerful for us to think about, especially on Veterans Day. In June of 2007, I was operating in the Anbar province of Iraq. And earlier in the year, a young Marine and an Army soldier were captured by Al-Qaeda. And one of the missions of special operations is to conduct hostage rescue. And we got word in June that there was a possibility that these individuals were going to be in a target location. I remember spinning up for that mission and getting everything ready. We call it a time-sensitive target, so the spin up for that to occur is pretty fast, usually 4 hours or less. And I remember getting everything ready, and then we launched on that mission in the evening hours. I remember sitting in the door of the helicopter, Blackhawk MH-60, TF-160th helicopter. And through my night vision goggles, looking at the city below, I remember I had my foot up on the wheel. Door gunner's right here next to me, and I'm just looking at the city below as we're flying over it. And I'm thinking through all the contingencies in my mind. Okay, if we land and we take fire, what if we take fire as we're coming in? What if, as we make entry, this occurs and that occurs? All the things that good leaders are doing as you're heading into that target. And as I was flying over the city and thinking about all these Iraqis who were sleeping below, it's probably 3 a.m. in the morning, and I thought about, man, how blessed am I? I am part of this amazing military fighting force, this warrior force that I've trained up to this level, that I'm part of a country that is willing to sacrifice its own warriors to get American citizens or warriors who have been captured by the enemy. And that I have the skill set to go do that. And I remember thinking to myself in that moment, you know what? If I die tonight, like that is a good death. Like I will go after and I will do everything in my power to try and rescue these guys. But if I was to go out tonight, then that is the life that I have lived and the journey that I've been on. I remember just resigning myself to that as we flew over the city before we conducted that operation. Unfortunately, when we landed, our guys were not there, and we would later find out that they had been killed months earlier when they finally found their bodies. But I made a choice in that moment. And every night that you went in on a mission, those were the choices we had to make. I did over 80 direct action missions, 80 missions where we kicked in doors and went after mid-level and high-level insurgent and Al-Qaeda leaders. And every time you made entry into that room, you never knew what was on the other side. We had to make this choice over and over and over again. Several months later, as we went through that deployment, conducting all these operations, we were getting close to the end. Incredibly successful deployment. One of the most successful I've ever been on in my career, working with probably the best assault troop I'd ever been with. Over those 80 kinetic operations, we captured 124 mid-level to senior Al-Qaeda and insurgent leaders, and we aided a whole bunch of other ones on their way who did not want to be captured. We were 1 week from, that's a very diplomatic way of saying that. We were 1 week from going home. And on September 12th, we got word that the #1 leader for Al-Qaeda in the Anbar province was going to be in a specific location in an area of Iraq outside of Fallujah called Al-Karma. Very dangerous place, a place we had been into multiple times. We had had a SEAL killed there. Petty Officer Clark Swedler was killed there in April. Every time we had gone into Karma, we had gotten into big firefights. I'd had guys wounded there in June. and one of the biggest firefights I had been in up to that point. So on that night, we knew that this could be a pretty dangerous operation. We were told that this leader traveled with a very large security detail, and every one of them wore suicide vests. If we got too close to the leader, they were trained to blow themselves up before we could get to him. So these were all the things we were thinking about as we left on that mission. We launched on the mission probably about 1 a.m. in the morning and took down the initial target. No one was there, which frequently happens. I mean, it just is how war, no different than business. Sometimes you don't close the deal, but on the battlefield, sometimes the intel is a little bit dated. But what we noticed is there was a lot of activity in that target. Somebody had recently just been there. And our snipers were on the roof and started saying, hey, there's a whole bunch of activity on another house about 150 yards away, which is unusual at night when there's a curfew and blacked out helicopters just landed someplace else. My boss, the ground force commander, said, hey, Red, take your team. Let's go find out what's going on there. Right about that time, we saw 5 individuals run out of the house, cross the street into some vegetation. So I took my team, and to make a long story short, our enemy leader was in that house, and his security detail had set up a very well-organized ambush line in that vegetation with multiple PKM machine guns. And my team and I walked right into that ambush. My medic was initially shot, pinned down. One of our other guys ran forward to grab him, dragged him back. There was nothing behind us, thousands of yards of empty Iraqi desert. The only thing behind us for cover was a large, like John Deere-style tractor tire, and then a large tree. One of our guys fell behind the tree. The other guys fell behind the tire. Maddie managed to grab our medic and drag him and our medic back, but in the process, he was shot 3 times. So now 2 guys are shot. I'm out front. I was laying down fire for them. I started yelling out commands, and I had both machine guns turned on me. I was shot across the body armor. I took 2 rounds in the left elbow, which I thought shot my arm off in the moment. I took rounds off my helmet. I had my left night vision tube shot off. I took rounds off my gun. I took a round off my right side plate, deciding it was a really bad place to be. I turned to try and get back to where the guys were, and it was at that point that I caught a round in the face. It hit me right in front of the ear. It traveled through my face. It took off my nose. It blew out my right cheekbone. What was left of my cheekbone broke and kicked out to the right. It vaporized my orbital floor. It broke all the bones above my eye. My eye fell in this newfound hole in my face. It broke the head of my jaw. It shattered my jaw to my chin, and it knocked me out. I fell probably 15 yards in front of the guys. They thought I was dead. Thankfully, the guys made a choice, never leave a man behind. Their initial reaction was, they could have thought, hey, let's continue to fall back. But they were like, no, we're going to get red. My team leader ran forward under enemy fire and got me back to the tire. But we were still so pinned down by the heavy fighting that we couldn't get out of there. So my team leader called for the Air Force AC-130 to bring in a fire mission. For those that don't know, a fire mission is where we bring munitions from an aircraft in the sky down onto the ground. It's one of the most amazing things that first world countries, especially our country, the way we wage war is we own the sky. And it gives you tremendous capabilities to be able to leverage on the battlefield. And the AC-130 is probably one of the most amazing assets on the battlefield with the imagery and targeting systems they have to be able to bring that capability. I've used it extensively up until that moment. It's probably saved my life on multiple occasions. And on that night when my team leader called, they said, there's no way. You guys are so close. You are extreme danger close. So danger close is a military term. Very smart people. Anybody engineer? So very smart military engineers basically analyze bombs when we drop them munitions, bullets and bombs, and they measure what is the concussive blast and also the fragmentation radius of these bombs and bullets. And through that, we create what are called danger close parameters. So as leaders, we have to know what are our danger close parameters. If we're dropping this type of bomb, how far away do we have to be to ensure we don't blow up or hurt our own people? And in war, friendly fire is a very real thing, and dropping bombs out of aircraft is a dangerous thing. And the AC-130 said, there is no way. You guys are extreme danger close. We will kill you. And my team leader continued to, we continued to fight, and my team leader continued to call them once again. It was about a 40-minute gunfight. Getting closer after the second call, and by the third call, he told them, we're running out of ammo. I got guys bleeding out. If we don't bring this in, no one's going to be left. And finally, at that point, they put the onus on him, made him take full responsibility that if they killed us, that it was my team leader's call, not the aircraft's call. And they brought in those rounds. And I remember my team leader calling out, hey, incoming. The gunship, it's nighttime. You can't see it, flies at a pretty high altitude. But when it goes off, you hear the gun go off. They fired 40 millimeter rounds, which is a pretty large explosive round. And I remember hearing it, boom, boom, boom. And waiting, it was about a 10-second delay when all of a sudden it impacted the ground in front of us and blew up over us, taking out those machine gunners, enabling us to get out of there. It ended up being the closest fire mission ever executed in the entire Iraq War. And I would not be here today if it wasn't for my teammates or for that AC-130. Leading up to the mission, I should have showed this video prior. I got ahead of myself. But leading up to the mission, this was what almost every night looked like. 96 hours after that firefight, I was medevaced from Al Karma straight to Baghdad, which was the closest combat support hospital. I was pretty critical by the time they got me in there. Doctors said I'd lost almost half of my blood. They said it was a miracle I survived. They saved my life. This picture was actually taken almost 12 hours after I was wounded, right as I came out of surgery. Somebody snapped this picture. From there, I went to Balad, where head injuries go, from Balad, where they did some more surgery. From Balad, I went to Landstuhl, Germany, where they did more surgeries. And then they put me on the medevac ICU flight back to the States. And pretty amazing, 96 hours. From the time I was wounded, I was back in Bethesda, Maryland. Over that period of time, I had 8 blood transfusions to save my life. I remember laying in the hospital bed in the beginning, thinking about what had happened and thinking to myself, as the doctors were inundating me with so much bad news. Lieutenant Redman, your elbow is totally destroyed. You have massive nerve damage. You have no use of your left hand. We're thinking about amputating your arm above the elbow. The structural integrity of your skull is compromised. We have to figure out somehow how to get bone back into your skull to stabilize that. Your jaw is totally shattered. You're wired shut. Almost my entire nose was gone. There was a little bit left on this side, but that was it. I just had tubes. I was wired shut. I was trached. They were feeding me through a stomach tube. I was so weak from the blood loss, I couldn't even go to the bathroom by myself. I had to have nurses. I couldn't even get out of bed. I had to have nurses help me use the bathroom. And I remember thinking about all that, all those thoughts, the negative thoughts that all of us as humans have, the same thoughts I talk to you about many people feel right now within our own country. There's no hope. There's nothing I can do. It's all outside of my control. And I had only one other thought that I was struggling with. I thought, it's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair! I had come back from a leadership failure to build myself back up, to be a good leader, a respected leader. Suddenly I come off the end of this amazing deployment. Everything was back on track. Suddenly to find myself lying in a hospital bed with doctors telling me it's going to take years to put me back together. Thinking to myself, I'm going to be disabled, disfigured, and my special operations career is over. And as I'm trying to digest all of this, there were a couple of people that came into the room. And we had a short conversation, and then the nurse came in. And the nurse came in, so they stepped off to the side, and the nurse is tending to me. And they started talking amongst themselves, but I caught bits and pieces of what they were saying. And they were saying, what a shame, what a pity. We send these young men and women off to war, and they come home broken and battered, and they're never going to be the same. What a waste. And they left. And then the nurse left. I remember laying in that bed, like thinking to myself, like, is that me? Like, is that my future? Am I going to just be this broken veteran that never is able to do anything? Greatest gift you have in this life is a choice. No one forces you to lay there and feel sorry for yourself when things go wrong. And guess what? Bad things happen to good people all the time. What I had learned throughout my military career, what I had witnessed with so many amazing, incredible people was they made a choice to get up and drive forward. They made a choice to be deliberate. They made a choice to be intentional. I was like, man, that ain't going to be me. And for all the guys that I had lost, what a disservice and a discredit and a total insult to them. I got a second chance. I survived. Do you know how many families would give anything to have their sons or daughters to come home instead of being their names engraved on a granite wall someplace? And I thought about that in that moment, and I was like, that is not going to be me. I choose to drive forward. I'm going to lead. I'm going to set the example. You can lead from any situation, including a hospital bed. When my wife came back into the room, I couldn't talk. All I could do was write. And I wrote to her, that's never going to happen again. I said, no one's ever going to come into this room again and feel sorry for me. And from this point forward, I refuse to feel sorry for myself. I will do nothing but drive forward and be positive. I will do nothing but drive forward and try and make an impact in my life and the people around me. And I said, nobody's coming in my room like that again. And I wrote out this sign. And the sign said, attention to all who enter here. If you're coming in this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds I received, I got in a job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country that I deeply love. I will make a full recovery. What is full? That's the absolute utmost physically. I have the ability to recover. And I'm going to push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. If you are not prepared for that, go elsewhere. And we signed it, the management. You know? I mean, I was serious. A New York firefighter, a legend in the New York Fire Service, a gentleman by the name of John Vigiano. He was a Marine, then he went on to literally a legend in the New York Fire Service. John had retired maybe in, I don't know, the late 90s, but he had two sons. One was a firefighter and one was a police officer. He lost both sons on 9/11. Neither of them were on duty. They both went to the call, and when the towers fell, they were both killed. And after that, John started making regular pilgrimages to Bethesda to meet with wounded warriors. And I remember when he came in the room and we met, he saw that sign on the door, and man, we just hit it off. There was so much smack talking. I was like, don't eat my crayons, you know, and a lot of good Marine, you know, and Navy, you know, bickering. But I became really good friends with John. But he took a picture of this sign. It was early. And he wrote a blog about it. And that blog went viral. Went all over the place. It was all over the news. It ended up earning me an invitation to the White House to meet President Bush. I did not keep the sign because I didn't feel like it was mine to keep. I felt like it represented the spirit of our country and our wounded warriors. So I asked President Bush to sign it, and it was framed, and to this day, it still hangs in the Wounded Ward at Walter Reed. Wounded warriors touch it for luck as they go to and from surgery. It has been featured in documentaries. It's been written about in multiple books. Secretary Robert Gates wrote about it in his book. First Lady Michelle Obama was so moved by it, she wrote about it twice in her book and sent me a handwritten note on what it meant to her. I have had individuals that have had cancer hang the sign. They've been in accidents. Their kids have cancer, or their kids have been in accidents, and they've written me and said, "Thank you, I hung your sign on my door." I don't tell you that to say, "Hey, look at me, I wrote this sign." I tell you that because that is the power of choice, the power of positivity in the face of negativity. Everything that represents our nation, grit, resilience, sacrifice, that's what that sign represents. We talk about empowered citizenship. I lost a lot of friends. I got a second chance. I'm still here. So when I think about empowered citizenship, I think about we have a duty and responsibility as Americans to live our best life we possibly can, to choose to live greatly, to choose to make an impact. Because there are hundreds of thousands of individuals like buddies of mine who are no longer here to be able to make an impact, who are no longer here to be an empowered citizen. And their families would give anything for them to still be here. So being an empowered citizen is making a difference. And it doesn't mean, you have to go out and serve your country. I would like to see that, but that's just not the case. And being an empowered citizen is making an impact in your community. It's being a leader. It's going out and getting an education and setting the example and raising your kids to understand that the country we live in is an amazing country. You really won the lottery by being born here. Are we perfect? Unequivocally not. We have problems, but the problems are so much better than other places in the world that I've been. To be an empowered citizen, in my opinion, is a big part of leadership. It's be the light in the darkness. Set that example. Be positive. Choose to make a difference. Choose to lift others up. Choose to focus on the positive things about this country, not the negative things. Everybody, all they want to do is focus on that negativity. Man, the sacrifice that I saw, they chose to be positive. They chose to be deliberate. They chose to make a difference. So I think it's critical because it's the essence of who we are. We're Americans. It's what we do. We need to remember that. So I want to thank you guys for letting me share some of my views and my story on this Veterans Day. Every veteran in here played a part in that. Make no mistake. I've written 3 books now. I've got a 4th one coming out. I believe they have Overcome and Trident here, so afterwards I'll be glad to go out and if any of you guys are interested in getting one of those books. Trident did fairly well. It's a New York Times bestseller. I think I don't know how many, it's sold a lot of copies. And Overcome is a Amazon bestseller. Both books were chosen for Navy and Marine Corps reading list, and I believe Trident, or maybe Overcome, was selected for the Coast Guard leadership reading list also. So if any of you are interested in learning more about me, you can go to jasonredman.com. If you're interested in buying a signed copy of the book and you're not able to get it tonight, just use the code IOvercome and it'll give you a discount. And the last thing, there's this new invention called social media. It was invented not that long ago to be as negative and hateful as possible. But I'm really weird. I use it to be positive, and I try to put out nothing but positive messages about leadership and resilience and making a difference. So if any of you want to try something different on social media, you can give me a follow. So I'd like you to open up for questions. I'm glad to answer anything and everything. If you want to ask me questions about the SEAL teams or Ranger School or operations or just my views on leadership, the majority of my talks are on leadership and resilience. I don't always get to give this talk, but on Veterans Day and times like this, I want to give this talk. So I hope that it had an impact on you. So, thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
No,
hold
prob-
on a minute. We have a microphone for you.
Okay. An AC-130, is that a helicopter or a plane? What is that?
It is a plane. So the C-130 is a large cargo transport plane. It's big enough that it can fit probably 3 Humvees inside of it, maybe 2. But it's pretty large. And there's different variations of it. There's regular C-130 as a transport. We have KC-130s that actually are configured to deliver fuel, aerial refueling platforms. We have MC-130s that are specially equipped for special operations, low level, night flying. It was an MC-130 that I landed on the beach with in England. And then the AC-130, which I'm always fascinated by how this came to be. There's no doubt in my mind. It was probably during the Vietnam time frame that the AC-130, they had gunships in Vietnam, but not the AC-130. And it had to be a redneck that invented this. There's no doubt in my mind. You know, like, that's redneck thinking right there. You know, like, what I'm envisioning is there was some crusty Air Force tech sergeant standing next to the tarmac, and there was a C-130, and right next to the tarmac there was an artillery battery. You know, the Army was firing artillery shells like a 105 battery. And probably some young private's looking up at the tech sergeant who's smoking his cigar deep in thought, and he's like, "Sergeant, what are you thinking about?" And I guarantee it went something like this. "Look here, Private. You see that howitzer? Yes. You see that aircraft? Yes. I'm going to put that howitzer in that aircraft." And that's exactly what happened. The AC-130 has a 105 millimeter howitzer that hangs out the side of it, along with some of the most elaborate targeting system. It has a 40 millimeter Bofors cannon, 25 millimeter chain gun. It can fire with that 25 millimeter gun. It can fire 6,000 rounds per minute. It can cover an entire football field inch for inch in about a minute period. It is amazing. It is a testament to American ingenuity and firepower, and I owe my life to it on many missions, including, obviously, the night. So the crew that did the mission that night, all the main leaders in that crew that night, the pilot, the flight commander, the targeting officer, I think there were 5 of them that received Distinguished Flying Crosses, and the entire crew got air medals for that night. So, and the other thing about that was really cool, they had flown a flag on the next night, and they brought me 40 millimeter shell casings and a 105 shell casing that were fired during our mission, and they presented me the flag. And that is the flag that is in my retirement shadow box that flew on that aircraft. And the 40 millimeter casing went into a plaque that I presented to President Bush when I met him. So he either has it in his house or it's in the presidential library. I'm not sure where it went yet. So.
Hi, I'm asking this question actually for my son.
Sure.
He would like to know, Jason, have you ever flown in a C-5 Galaxy?
I have flown, and I've actually jumped out of I've flown in a C-5 Galaxy, and I've jumped out of a C-17. So the C-17 replaced the C-5s. They're not quite as big, but they're still pretty impressive. So.
Emily, up in the back.
I think it's safe to say that you're preaching to the choir here for the most part. You've got a really great audience and service people here. Have you ever been able to present your side of America to a college campus? And if so, how was it received?
I have. I spoke at Lafayette College, and I gave a talk, not this talk. It's actually a talk about leadership. And Part of my talks, I talk about getting off the X, and I talk about the victim mindset. I think one of the problems that we're having in our country right now is there are a lot of people, we want to encourage this victim mindset. If something happened to you, or if you are a certain demographic and you are not able to move forward, it's because you're a victim. And the only way you'll ever move forward is the government or somebody has to help you. And don't get me wrong, there are levels of discrimination, and we have some areas of our country that we can do better. But the problem with that line of thinking is there's tens of millions of amazingly successful Americans who all came from similar demographics, race, creed, color, gender, religious, whatever it is, who broke out of that and found success. And instead of focusing on that small demographic, instead we want to focus on the big one and push this victim mindset. And I am a huge fan of self-leadership and driving forward, and I talk about getting off the X. I frequently talk about the myth of twos. You're too this, you're too that, you're too big, you're too small, you're too dumb, you're too smart, whatever it is, fill in the blank. So I gave that speech, and I was like, boy, tonight's the night. I checked my social media, am I about to be canceled? And it actually was received pretty well. I'm in the middle on my views, and I present things fact-based. I try to present them fact-based from the things I've seen in the world and the things that I've experienced. I grew up poor as dirt. I wore hand-me-downs. I'm super successful now through my hard work, through there's no magic sauce that enabled me to get out of what happened to me. It was a choice, and continuing to grind forward. 40 surgeries is what I went through over 4 years. I had a lot of setbacks. At one point, this is the third nose they built me. The first two failed. At one point, they had to cut everything away, and I literally just had a hole in my face. I looked like Skeletor. You guys remember Skeletor from He-Man? Yeah. I know why that dude was so angry. Because, you walk around with a big hole in your face, I was evil too. But all of it built me to be better. That's what builds an overcome mindset. And those were the things that I talked about to them. So it was pretty well received. I was kind of amazed. So.
First of all, Jason, thank you very much for your service to the country.
Yes, sir.
We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
I spent 40 years in the aerospace and defense business, so I was around you people all the time. We built equipment for that
Who are you
airship.
calling you people? No, I'm kidding.
The military.
Yeah, no.
That's who I mean by you.
Yeah,
And I want to ask you a serious question. I'm concerned. World War II, my parents, they all served in World War II. And then we had the Korean War, Vietnam, and then the wars that you folks were in. And I'm concerned about today. I'm not worried about the people like you. I'm worried about the leadership, the politicians and the generals. What's your assessment of the strength of that today? It seems like the military academies, the universities, they're all making excuses for everything. Are you concerned about that?
I am. I'm very concerned. There's a shift that's occurred in the military recently that I'm troubled by, and I know many friends of mine. The military is apolitical. There should be no politics in the military. I served under multiple presidents over my time in the military, and it's not really your place to agree or disagree with political leadership. It is your place it's your job to defend our country. It also is, there should be, it's not perfect, but there should be no gender or religion or things like that in the military. Don't get me wrong, when you're out of uniform, obviously you have an individual as part of yourself, but on the battlefield, it's critical that we are a unified team, and there isn't really time or place in battle or in our ability to conduct operations to get into individualism. And right now there's this push in the military that it's all about individualism. And that's very dangerous. I worry about that. And what I have seen is that individuals who don't agree with that are being told, hey, you're going to have to leave. So I worry about that. I worry about some of the decisions that have been made, the pullout in Afghanistan, the debacle that occurred there. And I think we did decades worth of damage to our future intelligence capabilities. We rely on relationships with individuals abroad is how we, it's not just American citizens that gather intel. The way we gather intel, our strongest ability to gain intel is off human intelligence. That is, I build relationships with people that live in countries all around the world. And after 9/11, we greatly expanded our intelligence capabilities within our national agencies and within the military. And in Afghanistan, we basically, in a very short period of time, said, hey, we don't care that you're supporting us, and we really turned our back on all these people. So we sent this message around the world that, hey, America's not going to support you. If you want to provide us information, that's great, but we're not going to support you if things go wrong. So what's that going to mean? That's going to mean people in the future are not going to help us, which is going to hinder our intelligence collection capabilities. So China is a tremendous threat. China is stealing all our technology. I went to a brief at Collins Aerospace, a company I'm sure you're familiar with, and this was not classified. And the former chairman of Air Force Intelligence was giving a brief about the threat of Chinese espionage and the level that was occurring. And he showed a picture of, I think it was the F-35, which is one of our newest, most premier strike fighters. And there was a cut picture looking at the nose of the F-35, and they moved it away, and they said, this is the new Chinese, whatever it was called. And they put it side by side. So on one side was the Chinese version, one side was the F-35. They were identical. So the Chinese are stealing our technology, and I don't know. I hope I am a fan of diplomacy through strength. I am a fan of a strong national defense that hopefully we never have to use. Just a mere threat that if we have a strong national defense, it helps. We have the diplomatic side of the house, and then we have the military side of the house. But right now, I worry about our state of the military with a focus on individualism, which is projecting a lot of weakness, which emboldens our adversaries. Yeah. So.
Other questions?
I did not shoot bin Laden. Every time I turn around, it's like there's another teammate. It's like, I shot him too. Okay. I didn't. I wasn't there.
Yeah, thanks again for your service. Appreciate it. Let me ask you, after you've been through 4 or 5 firefights, and you're going to the next one, dark building, dark terrain, nighttime, 3 in the morning, what do you and your buddies think of at that moment?
I think you just kind of accepted it. As we got towards the end of the deployment, I know that we all talked about, boy, we've had a lot of close calls. But you also, one of the things, people often ask me, were you afraid? And no, don't get me wrong, there is a level of fear. There is no courage without fear. Fear is a natural part of who we are. And being in special operations, you have to learn, even in training, we do things that are pretty dangerous. You have to learn how to manage fear and still execute. For me, what I came to find is, at least as a leader, I had so much to do. I had so much to focus on, so many different moving parts. Where are my guys? How are we locking down this target? Depending on what I was doing, that I never had time to really think about being shot at, if that makes sense. Aside from the night where, I was no longer really having a chance to think about anything else. I was pretty much, combat ineffective, sleeping on the job out front and all. But no, I think interesting, talking to other friends who were special operations warriors, I think what we all recognize, the interesting thing about combat is it's unequivocally not fair. A seasoned 40-year sniper, let me rephrase that. A 12-year-old kid can throw an AK-47 over the wall and pull the trigger, and he'll kill you just as fast as a 40-year seasoned sniper. So I think all of us just kind of, when it's your time to go, it's your time to go, and you just kind of have to accept that. Don't be dumb. Don't do dumb things. Obviously we utilize tactics and 360-degree security and many things that we do to have the advantage over the enemy and try and minimize the threat to the greatest extent. One of the interesting things about special, I have so much more respect for our National Guardsmen and some of our regular infantry units. I think they're bigger studs than we are. We had all the training and we heavily stacked the deck in our favor. We really prepped the battlefield. We had all the assets, all the equipment. We had some of the best intel. We had national level intel, air assets, everything when we went in. And when things went wrong, they went really wrong. But these young infantrymen and definitely National Guardsmen, I mean, they frequently were doing stuff without that training, without that intel, without that level of support that we had. So I'd see those guys and I'd be like, man, my hat's off to you. So.
We
Yes,
have time
ma'am.
for one final question.
Hi, Jason. So I brought a couple of fifth graders with me.
What's up, guys? I was a fifth grader once.
Well, and to that point, so what would you, to go from fifth grade to where you are now, when they go back to school on Monday morning, what would you say to fifth grader you?
I would say to fifth grader me, never let anybody tell you what you can or can't do. Not bucking the, not getting yourself in trouble, but for your future. Any dream, or that is the greatest thing about this country. As of right now, we still have freedom and opportunity. It is what makes this country great. And if me, a young knucklehead runt, literally, I was 14 years old when I decided to become a Navy SEAL. I was 95 pounds and probably 4'11". Do you know how many people laughed at me when I said that? How many people told me I'll never make it, who ridiculed me, who made fun of me? I got bullied in high school and junior high, but I never let it stop me from going after my dream. So you drive your ability to achieve your dreams. No one else does. You do. So whatever you want to do, remember I talked about it's a choice? It's a choice, and you follow it and you go after it, and you don't listen to anybody that tells you you can't do it. Only you decide if you can't do it. That's it. And most of the time, even that's not true. You'll have a little voice that'll say you can't, but if you even ignore yourself, it's amazing what you can accomplish. You know how many times in SEAL training, my little voice said, dude, this sucks, we should quit. But I didn't, because I knew if I quit, I wouldn't make it. So that's my advice to you. So someday, go cure cancer.
Thank you, Lieutenant Redman, for sharing your inspiring story with us this evening. We are so grateful that of all the places that you could have chosen to be on Veterans Day or around Veterans Day, you selected to be with us. So we're extremely grateful for that. We are also very appreciative of the legacy of service and leadership that Colonel Ralph W. Hauenstein has provided as we look to raise a community of ethical, effective leaders for the 21st century. This evening, copies of Jason's books, The Trident and Overcome, are available for sale outside the auditorium, and Jason will be available for book signing. Please join us here in Charles W. Loosemore Auditorium at 4 p.m. on Friday, December 1st for our final Wheelhouse Talk of the semester with Tricia Thomas, Dean of Kirkhoff College, the College of Nursing here at Grand Valley State University. Thank you again for joining us this evening. Happy Veterans Day, and enjoy the rest of your evening.